We're going to continue today with the happenings in Jerusalem leading up to the crucifixion, the week that we call Holy Week. And you remember that Jesus was staying in Bethany, only 2 miles away from Jerusalem, and each day he and his disciples would walk to Jerusalem. Each day, except we don't know if they did on Wednesday. There's nothing recorded about what they did on Wednesdays, but we assume that they still did, but they may not have. They may have rested up because Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday were pretty active days. But during those trips to Jerusalem, Jesus would find a spot in one of the courtyards at the temple. There were one on each side and one big one in the front, and he would start teaching. He would talk to people, anyone that would come up and listen to him. And you remember that during those times, those Pharisees and those Sadducees, who were the pompous religious leaders, would come up to him and question what he was saying, and they would ask him questions about the law, about God, and about various other things, trying to trick him up, trying to trick him into saying something that they thought was not true, because they were the ones that supposedly knew everything there was to know about the Mosaic law as it's written in the first 5 books of the Old Testament. They weren't happy. And they were against him. And they were spreading rumors amongst the people throughout Jerusalem. Murmurings, making people start doubting. That's what the devil does to us. One of the very first things, the devil tries to make you doubt God and Jesus. That was exactly what the serpent did in the Garden of Eden. Tried to plant doubt into Adam and Eve. And that's what the serpent, the devil, Satan does. And that's what these Pharisees and Sadducees were trying to do to the people in Jerusalem. They were trying to plant doubt in their minds. And during one of these teaching lessons, they came up to Jesus and they asked him, ask him about taxes. Do people really have to pay taxes? And you remember what Jesus says? He says, give me one of your coins. Well, it was a denarius. And he said, whose picture is on this coin? And they said, well, it's Caesar, of course. And he said, then render unto Caesar those things that are Caesar's, but render unto God those things that are God's. Now, Jesus was telling them that we have to pay our taxes. We owe the government a certain amount of money. And he was saying, render unto Caesar those things that are Caesar's. So if we owe a debt, even if it's to the government, Jesus is saying, pay your debts. But he's also saying you owe God. He also said, render unto God those things that are God's. So not only did he say, yes, we owe taxes, we owe the government, we should pay them, but he's also saying that we should pay God. What do we owe God? Well, you owe him your heart, your soul, your life, your afterlife if you're a believer in Jesus Christ. You owe him everything. And you should be giving him the best of you. So you should also be paying God, just like you should be paying your taxes. That's a funny thing to be talking about right here before April, isn't it? During tax season. But you should. Now, another thing these Pharisees and Sadducees did not believe in, they did not believe in the resurrection. They did not believe that anywhere in Old Testament law did Moses write about the resurrection of the body. It just wasn't there. So they didn't believe there was an everlasting life in heaven with God after death. And that makes me wonder, these people are supposed to be so smart. And Jesus had already ridiculed them 2 or 3 times with questions that they gave him, like about the taxes. Why would they ask him about something they didn't even believe in? And I would have thought, well, we better not bring that subject up. He'll make us look like fools with that too. But they did. Tells you something about them, doesn't it? But they live for the present. They live to make profit off of the church as it was at that time. And that's one of the reasons they were really mad at him. Remember what Jesus did on Sunday? When he went into the temple, he ran all the money changers and the merchants out. He cut into their profit. They were making money off of that because they were the ones that ran the temple. So, yeah, they were mad at him and they were trying to discredit him. On Tuesday of Holy Week, the Sadducees, a couple of them come to him, and they ask him about marriage. Not here on earth, but marriage in heaven. Mosaic law says, and this is what they told him, Mosaic law says that if a husband dies and he has an unwed brother, that widow must marry that brother. Or the brother should come in and take over and marry the widow and take care of her. And then they go on with this unlikely story, because remember, they're just trying to trick him. This story that just would never, ever happen, maybe. And they say, well, what if this first husband was one of 7 brothers? He dies, and the woman marries the second brother. He dies, and the woman marries the third brother. Goes all the way down the line, and this woman at the end would have had 7 husbands during her life on earth. I don't know if I'd been about the 5th, I wouldn't have married her after the first 4 then died. But still, if this was something they were making up, trying to trick him, you know, they were supposed to be intelligent. And they thought, well, Jesus is not going to have an answer to this, because it just doesn't, nowhere in the law does it say anything about something like this. And then their final question, after they told him all this about these husbands, is, at the resurrection, whose wife will she be, since all 7 were married to her? At the resurrection, in the afterlife, which one of those 7 will be her husband? What they're asking here is, when we get to heaven, will we be married? Will we have spouses? Have y'all ever heard a preacher preach about this or talk about it? I haven't. I think Baptists, which I grew up as, sort of shy away from this fact, because they don't want to believe, I guess they don't want to believe what Jesus said, because Jesus told them about being married in heaven. His emphatic answer was, no, you will not. He didn't say, he just said, no, you will not. Now, Chris is going to read what Jesus' actual answer was in Mark 12:25.
For when they shall rise from the dead, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels which are in heaven.
This is probably one of the most popular questions about our afterlife. Will we be married like we were on earth? Will our spouse be there? You know, Linda, when you get to heaven, are you and Ellis going to be a married couple together? That's one of the big questions. Another question people ask about the afterlife, of course, is, will we know our relatives? Will they be there? Will we see our mom and dad and know that they are our mother and father, and things like that people ask. Another question people ask is, will our pets be with us? Now, God doesn't specifically say your pets, but in Isaiah 65, when Isaiah is talking under the direction of God about the new heaven and the new earth that he will create, he talks about animals. Talks about the lion and the sheep. Well, if he's going to have lion and sheep and goats and everything in the new heaven and the new earth that he creates, why can't my puppy be there? That to me said, sure, there will be animals in the newly created heaven and earth after the 1,000-year reign of Jesus. Our pets will be with us. But Jesus gives a little more insight into life after death. You know, we all, I guess God created us to wonder about, is there life after death? What will it be like? Will we have our spouse be with us? Will our parents be with us? You know, that humans have since the beginning of time been curious and wondered about what happened and tried to prepare for the afterlife. There's a book called the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and it's filled with all kinds of information about how to prepare for the afterlife. There was a tomb one time of a pharaoh that had been sealed for 5,000 years, and in that tomb there was a boat that the pharaoh had buried with him so he could sail through the afterlife in peace. A Greek religion, in a Greek religion, they would put a coin into the mouth of the corpse so they could pay the fare to travel over into their immortal life. Some American Indians will bury a pony and a bow and arrow with their dead so they can have a good time in the happy hunting grounds after they die. In Greenland, when Eskimo children die, they were buried along with the dog, so the dog could be the child's guide into the afterlife. So people have always thought unusual things about the afterlife. Some unusual beliefs there. But you know what they really should have been worried about and thinking about? Where I go after I die, is it going to be comfortable or is it going to be very hot? Those are really the only two things they should have been worried about. But God created us to anticipate this life after death, and He promised it to us many, many times throughout the Bible. And He didn't leave it to us for our imagination, for us just to imagine what it would be like. They were specifically told in the Bible. And here Jesus tells us what it would be like as far as husband and wife. But first of all, Jesus says the dead will rise. He says we will rise. That statement alone should have made the Sadducees turn and run, because they didn't believe in that. They didn't believe that you would rise from the dead. But Jesus just said to them, yeah, when you rise from the dead. That right there, they said, uh-oh, we done asked the wrong question. Because they knew He was going to tell more. He had more to say, and yes, He did. Then He goes on to talk about marriage in heaven, and He says, nope, not going to be there. Now, I have some personal thoughts about this. I know that when I get to heaven, we may not be married, but Billy Ruth and I will have a special place in our hearts for each other. I know that it will be we'll all have a new spiritual body, a spiritual way of thinking, but I just know that after 30-something years already together, when we get to heaven, we're going to have a place with each other. Something, you know, it won't be marriage as we know it here on the earth. But there'll be a special place. Maybe not a husband-wife relationship, but there'll be a special bond there. I asked Cindy Craig the other day when she was cutting my hair. She's the wife of the Chris Craig, who is the preacher at First Baptist in Ruston. I asked her what they thought, and she basically told me the same thing. She said, no, there'll be no marriage. Chris won't be my husband, but I believe he'll have a special place in my heart. And then she said, you know, that's sad, isn't it? And it really is. It's sort of, but when you think about it, we will be together. And I believe we'll know each other. And I believe we'll spend eternity together. Now, as far as, you know, I've been married more than once. So as far as my ex-wife goes, I don't know. If she makes it to heaven, she'll be just another person there. You know, there won't be a special bond, I don't think. But there'll also be no anger, no animosity, no hatred, nothing like that, because you can't do that in heaven. She'll be another heavenly body, spiritual body, just like mine. Like I said, if she makes it there. Marriage was designed by God after the Garden of Eden for companionship for men and women and to perpetuate the human race on earth. God created marriage for earth only, not for heaven. In heaven, we'll have just that special spiritual relationship with each other and with everyone else. And like I said, there'll be no hatred, no animosity, no anger, no fear, no memories of past things that may have hurt you by other people if they make it to heaven and they're there with you. Then Jesus says, now that's all I'm going to say about marriage in heaven. The next thing Jesus says is that we will be like angels. Wow, that's pretty cool, isn't it? We will be like angels. Just think of all the things that angels have done over the centuries. You know, maybe God will call on one of us when we get there. Hey, go tell this guy I need him to do something. Maybe we'll be able to be messengers for God. You know, because Jesus says we will be like angels. And I know that angels have mysterious bodies, like spiritual bodies, you know, that must be very unusual looking. Of course, a lot of us are already unusual looking as humans. Well, we're probably going to look even more unusual when we get to heaven if we're going to be angelic. Because remember, most of the time, the first thing angels have to tell humans is, fear not. You know, they must be fearsome looking when they appear. But the main thing about that, I think that Jesus was saying, is that angels cannot die. They can't. So he's saying that you will be like angels in that you will have a spiritual body and you will never die in heaven. Don't want you to be confused and think you will become an angel. We, as humans, when we die, do not get our wings and become angels. A lot of people believe that, but that is not what happens. You do get a new spiritual body in the new creation of heaven and earth, but you will not have wings like an angel, and you will not have that. The angels are a different creation than humans, and the humans after death and the resurrection are a different creation than the angels also. So we won't be like angels in that we'll have wings and do all the things that they do, but we will be like angels in that we will not die. That's really something great to look forward to after our resurrection. If that resurrection takes you to heaven, and that is where you're going to, right? I don't know what you're going to turn into if you go to hell. Bible don't tell us. But I do know that you're going to burn all day long, and that hurts. And you're going to be in pain. And the Bible in 2 different places says there will be gnashing of teeth. So I don't know if you're going to have a new body or it's going to be the one you're in right now. And there's fire consuming you all the time, but it doesn't consume you completely, just like the burning bush that appeared to Moses. You know, that's what I picture in hell for people who do not get the resurrection to heaven and get their angelic body. That's something to look forward to. You're going to be like an angel. So Jesus tells them there will be no marriage in heaven. He tells them they will be like angels. And then he sort of gives them a reprimand for even asking. He tells them, God's not the God of the dead. God is the God of the living. He says, you're badly mistaken for even thinking about death and God together. God is the God of the living. And I've told you over and over that knowing God is to be alive. Death, as it's mentioned several times in the Bible, when talking about death, they're talking about separation from God. So if you're resurrected, you go to heaven, you're with God, you're never dead, because you would never be separated from God. So if we're with God, we're not dead. We're living, and we will live with him forever. Jesus also then goes on to say, in heaven, we are sons of God. That's a good feeling also, to know that we will be his children. That means that he will take care of us, doesn't it? It also can refer back to the 5th commandment in Exodus 20. Honor your father. So he's also telling us we will be his sons, which means he will take care of us, but we should also honor him, just like we're told to honor our fathers and mothers on earth. What a wonderful feeling. What a wonderful thought for our future. To have a spiritual, angelic body, to never die, and to be called a son of God. You can be that one day. Yes, you can. Amen.